All right, welcome to section 2 of Unit 6. We are going to talk about the business structures during the time of the Second Industrial Revolution. First, we are going to have two classifications for the actions of these big business leaders that we will talk about. The first category that they can fall into is going to be what we call robber barons. Now think of it, a robber, a bad person, okay? They steal. And that's going to be the same definition that we give to this term here. Robber barons are going to be the business leaders that built their fortunes from stealing from their laborers. They're going to drain the country of all those natural resources that we talked about last time. The coal, the iron, they're going to pollute the environment, pollute the rivers. They're going to cut down all the trees to build up their cities. So they're taking away from the country's natural resources. They're going to persuade public officials, government officials, to interpret laws in their favors, give them those business contracts, allow for them to steal, turn the other cheek when they're mistreating their workers. They are going to ruthlessly drive out their competitors, control prices, make sure that they're the only ones making money in their field. And the way they do that is by paying their workers very small wages and forcing them to work in dangerous and unhealthy conditions. So robber barons building their wealth off of the backs of their workers, the backs of the public. This is going to be the negative side of these big business leaders. Remember, to make the most money, you have to spend the least money, which means you're not making your factories nice and shiny and clean and bright and safe. You're not paying your workers big wages so that they like working for you so that they can live on a good salary. No, you're going to cut corners any time that you can. You're going to bribe people to allow for those actions to continue. Robber barons, the negative side. Captains of industry. Think of a captain of a ship. People look up to them. Captains in the military ranks, people look up to them. They're hardworking. So captain of industry is going to be the positive side. These are going to be the actions of the big business leaders that serve the nation in a positive way. They'll increase the supply of their goods by building factories, which creates jobs, and people like that. They are going to increase productivity and expand the markets, not only across the United States, but maybe worldwide as well. When they create these jobs by building these new factories, by increasing productivity, they're allowing many Americans to have jobs and creating the potential for them to buy these new goods, raising the standard of living, making the United States join the rest of the world in these new inventions. The big piece here is that they are going to be what we call philanthropists. Okay, think of philanthropy, the donating, the charity. This is going to be the captains of industry. They're going to donate their wealth to build museums, to build libraries, to build universities. Okay, think about Carnegie Mellon, a great university, Vanderbilt. Stanford. These are all going to be well-renowned universities built because of the wealth donated by some of these captains of industry. Carnegie is also going to donate millions of dollars to build libraries across the United States. Carnegie Hall, that you can see with the piano there, built for the arts. Rockefeller Center, where they light the Christmas tree in New York City, donated with the money of these captains of industry to increase the wealth of the knowledge of people at this time. How did businesses get to be this big where we could have robber barons or captains of industry? It's going to be because, first, there's larger pools of capital. Now, when I say capital here, I mean money. Entrepreneurs, or the men who were starting these businesses, had access to massive amounts of money. Either they borrowed it or they asked for investors so they could grow the business to the lengths that they did. The second cause of this, allowing for the industrial revolution to grow in this way, is that we had a wider geographic span. We had railroads that connected the nation, the telegraph communicating across the nation. We can move the product from coast to coast. We also had a broader range of operations. Big businesses could now combine multiple operations and are going to be responsible for all stages of production under one roof. The best example of this is Ford with the assembly line. That's just one of many businesses that covered all the operations quickly in one place. We're also going to see a change in the role of owners at this time. No longer is it going to be the mom and pop shop where the owner is one of the major pillars working day to day. No, Rockefeller did not go into the oil refineries and do the work there. He paid people to do that. He paid a manager to make sure that the workers were doing what they were supposed to do, so that the owners of these big businesses could go and do just that. They could run the business, they could make sure the product was being sold, they could be the face of the product. They have people that they pay to do the hard labor day to day. That leads us into the new methods of management. We are going to have managers now that do the day-to-day business, that frees up the big business owners to do what they need to do. We're also going to have new market structures that allow for these people to rise through the ranks. We have a couple main market structures that we'll focus on. The first one is what we call an oligopoly. This is going to describe an industry that's dominated by only a few large profitable businesses. A good example of this is the pop or soda, whatever you call it, industry. If you go to a restaurant, which we aren't doing much of these days, but if you do, you sometimes ask, do you have Pepsi or Coke products? Okay, now I'm well aware that there are off-brand products when you go to the grocery store, but in the grand scheme of things, it is an oligopoly because Pepsi and Coke really have the control of the business there. And it's just those two. Their prices are very similar. They're in cahoots together, and people really decipher what they want between the two products based on what they prefer, and or what is available. Another market structure is a monopoly. This one's the easiest one to remember. We are going to have an industry that is dominated by one large business that has complete control of the product or service that they supply. Okay, monopoly, mono, one. One person is in control. Industrialists at this time are going to work to take these steps to create either an oligopoly or a monopoly because they want to limit or completely eliminate competition. And they'll have to work together at some points to do this. The railroads are going to have to work with the steel, with the oil, to create a way for them all to survive. And when we see these big business leaders working together to ensure that they have control over the entire economy and specifically in their own categories, we call these pools or trusts. Okay, they trust each other to set a price that works best for one another. They pool their ideas, put them together to find the benefit for each of them. Sometimes these relationships between big businesses are often referred to as a cartel. Now, I'm not talking about the drug cartel, but it could be used in the same way. This is a loose association of businesses that make the same product or products that work together to benefit each other, to set a price that works for each other. We are going to see the big business leaders and what they did to get to these new market structures, limiting or completely eliminating competition so that they have control over the market that they are in. Two ways to create a monopoly that we're going to go over is first horizontal integration. So maybe in math class or geography, you guys studied horizontal lines, lines that go across. Horizontal integration is that same idea. Purchasing companies of the same industry. Rockefeller is going to be the example for horizontal integration. It's when a large business purchases competing smaller companies in the same industry. So in Rockefeller's case, he would go out and buy up all the oil refineries possible. This creates one giant corporation that can lower production costs, set the price in the market, and have complete control. It's exactly what Rockefeller did with the oil industry. Anytime a refinery would open up, he would go straight to it and purchase it. That way, he owned all of the oil refineries. If anybody wanted oil, they had to come to him to refine it. Okay, so horizontal, buying everybody at your same level, same industry, controlling everything at that level. The second way that you can build a monopoly is through vertical integration, vertical going up and down. Okay, this is going to be when a company buys companies that operate before and after them in the production process. Carnegie Steel is going to be the example of vertical integration. Okay, Carnegie is going to purchase all the iron ore deposits and coke fields, the steel mills, the ships moved, the railroads used. So that way, he controls the product used to make the steel, where you would make the steel, the ships used to move the steel, and the railroads again used to move the steel. He would own all the steps in the production process. So if somebody else wanted to make steel, they would have to buy the products used to make it from him. They would have to use his steel mills. They'd have to come to him to use the ships to move it. They would have to come to him to use the railroads to move it. So he could set a price that would drive out his competitors of these pieces of the production process if he so choose to, which he did. And at the same time, it reduces the costs for himself to make the product because he owns everything. And if he can reduce the price of making the product, he can set his product price lower than anybody in the same field competing with him. And they would never be able to survive because they can't afford his prices to purchase anything they need to make the product. And even if they could, they couldn't set their price low enough for people to want to purchase it. So vertical and horizontal integration are the two ways that we know of to build a monopoly. Now, as business was growing, people are going to start to say, hey, the things that these guys are doing are not that great. Maybe the government should step in. Maybe somebody should help the people out. So, as big business grew, some Americans began to be concerned and they demanded for government to interact. So, the government is looking at the economy and they say, you know what? Maybe we don't want to do this. They don't want to interfere because the captains of industry are contributing to the country's wealth. And they say, you know what, that's more important than the practices of the robber barons and how they're getting that wealth. So the government, in order to make the people happy who are concerned about the practices of big business, but not take away from what big business is actually doing, they are going to pass what's known as the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1890, which was supposed to limit the power of big business. But what it actually says is that it outlawed any combination of companies that restrained interstate trade or commerce. Huh. Well, uh, because it says combination of companies that are restraining interstate trade or commerce, it was extremely hard to catch these big business leaders breaking this law. It was extremely vague and very hard to apply, and it was what we know as a paper tiger. Sounded great on paper, let the American people know that the government was doing something without actually doing anything. So the Sherman Antitrust Act put a big old star next to this one and mark it as a failure in your brain because Congress didn't really want to stop big business, but they knew they needed to do something. So they passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, which was meaningless in actual reality to be used against these leaders. Now, next time we come together, we are going to talk about the big business leaders themselves.